My fiancée Chloe announced she was going on a 2-week Tantra healing retreat to Bali with her ex-boyfriend. I was in the middle of finalizing a predictive model at my desk, 80,000 lines of clean data telling a clear story when she walked in and stood directly in front of my monitors. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she was about to say something profound she'd read in a self-help book. "Ethan, my soul needs to tell you something." She began, her voice low and serious. I kept typing. "I'm going on a spiritual journey with Caleb." Caleb, her ex from college. I stopped typing. She continued. "We're going to a retreat in Bali. It's a 2-week intensive on Tantra and healing our inner child. We both feel our energies are blocked, and we need to do this for our future." She actually said that. Our future. The data points from the last 6 months suddenly connected in my mind. The late night texts. She quickly deleted the expensive yoga pants she bought with my credit card, the way she'd talk about their deep spiritual connection. It wasn't a blocked energy. It was a clear pattern. She was waiting for an argument, for tears, for a fight. She was waiting for me to give her more data to use against me. I took a deep breath, looked her straight in the eye, and gave her a result she couldn't have predicted. "Sounds great." She blinked, surprised by my calm. Then her face broke into this huge, relieved smile like a child who just got away with something. "Oh, Ethan, I knew you'd understand. This is why I love you. You're so evolved." She kissed me on the forehead the way you'd praise a dog for learning a new trick, and then immediately turned away, her thumbs already flying across her phone screen, probably booking the flights to Bali with my credit card. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd found a loophole in the system. What she didn't understand is that I am the system. My name is Ethan. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a data analyst. I don't see the world in emotions or vibes. I see it in patterns, probabilities, and outlier data points. For 3 years, I've been trying to make the data on my relationship with my fiancée Chloe make sense. Chloe is a life coach and energy healer. She lives in a world of chakras, crystals, and inspirational Instagram quotes, all of which I discovered are incredibly expensive. She moved into my penthouse apartment a year ago, a place I'd worked my ass off for. She called it our sanctuary of high vibrations. I called it Exhibit A. I paid the rent. I paid the utilities. I paid for the organic, gluten-free, $5 an ounce groceries she needed to maintain her vessel. I even paid for her business research trips, which always seemed to coincide with sales at luxury spa resorts. My financial stability, I realized, had become the invisible foundation for her very visible, very irresponsible spirituality. For a long time, I classified the red flags as anomalies, statistical noise in an otherwise stable system. I loved her, or at least I loved the version of her my heart had projected onto the data. But a good analyst never ignores the outliers. You study them, because eventually enough outliers create a new trend line. Data point 1, the financial statements. Her business expenses were a masterpiece of fiction. Hundreds of dollars at Lululemon weren't for client meetings, they were costumes for her brand. The weekly $50 energy clearing lunches with other creatives were just another line item in the budget I alone was funding. When I'd gently bring it up, she'd say things like, "Ethan, you can't put a price on building a community of abundance. Your scarcity mindset is blocking your own flow." It was brilliant, really. She turned her financial dependence into a lecture on my spiritual failings. Data point 2, the communication logs. Her phone was her fortress. It was always face down on the table. If I walked into the room while she was texting, the screen would instantly go dark. She called it protecting her energy from outside influence. I called it hiding something. There were late night calls she'd take on the balcony whispering about vibrational alignment with people who weren't me. It was a clear pattern of encrypted communication. Data point 3, the avoidance of commitment. Every time I mentioned adding her name to the lease, just for legal protection, she'd wave it off. "It's just a piece of paper, baby. Our energetic contract is what truly matters." She didn't want the responsibility of a legal contract. She just wanted the security of my signature on the checks. My heart was running one algorithm, telling me to trust, to believe in the potential. But my brain was running another, a cold, logical regression analysis that pointed to one inevitable conclusion. Her announcement about Bali wasn't an anomaly. It was the final data point that confirmed the trend. It was the moment the projection became reality. She hadn't just decided to go on a trip. She had, with a single entitled statement, revealed the entire flawed source code of our relationship. And she'd given me 2 weeks to run the final diagnostics. I drove her to the airport on Tuesday morning. She hugged me at the curb, her suitcase full of new yoga pants and my credit card receipts. 2 weeks will fly by, she said, giving me a quick, dismissive peck on the cheek. I'll have limited phone access, so don't worry if I don't text much. I need to disconnect in order to truly connect. I smiled and nodded, the perfect supportive fiancé. No problem. Have fun. Finding yourself. I watched her walk through the sliding glass doors, a triumphant little bounce in her step. I waited until the departure board showed her flight to Bali was officially in the air. Then I drove not back to our apartment, but straight to my best friend Ryan's law office downtown. The moment I sat down, the emotional algorithm switched off and the strategic one took over. The pacing of the world seemed to speed up. Then I laid out the situation. Ryan, a man who lives and breathes contracts and clauses, leaned back in his leather chair and smiled. She's not a tenant, Ethan, he said, the legal certainty in his voice, like a balm on my frayed nerves. She's a long-term guest. Her name isn't on the lease, she's paid 0 rent, and she has no legal claim to the property. You can change the locks this afternoon if you want. That was the smart detail, the legal confirmation I needed. It wasn't just an emotional decision anymore, it was a legally sound business move. Then I went to the bank. I sat with a personal banker and explained that I needed to open a new individual account. I transferred exactly half of the money from our joint savings, the half that was my inheritance from my grandparents, into the new account. I left her half untouched. This wasn't about punishment. It was about precision. It was about severing a connection that had become parasitic. The banker didn't even blink. She just nodded and handed me my new debit card. Then I went home to her sanctuary and began the great data migration. For 2 days, I didn't pack. I documented, I became an archaeologist of our financial life. I laid out every bank statement, every credit card bill from the last 18 months on the dining room table. I created a new Excel spreadsheet, my sanctuary. Column A, date. Column B, expense. Column C, paid by Ethan. Column D, paid by Chloe. By the time I was done, column C was a cascading waterfall of numbers, totaling in the tens of thousands. Column D was a barren desert, a beautiful, stark, and undeniable field of zeros. I saved the file as Final Analysis XLSX. Then I hired a professional moving crew. I didn't want to touch her things. I wanted the process to be impersonal, professional, and beyond reproach. I supervised as 2 men carefully wrapped her crystals in bubble wrap, folded her expensive yoga pants, and placed her self-help books into 17 perfectly labeled boxes. They were done in 4 hours. I paid them, tipped them well, and they were gone. Her entire existence in my home condensed into a neat little pyramid of cardboard. Then I signed the lease on my new apartment. A smaller place, clean and modern, in a different part of town. A blank slate. The landlord handed me the keys. They felt solid in my hand. Real. Then I called the locksmith. He arrived at the penthouse an hour later. He was a quiet, efficient man who didn't ask any questions as he drilled out the old lock and installed a new high-security deadbolt. He handed me 2 new keys. The old reality was now physically inaccessible. I walked through the empty, quiet apartment one last time. It was clean, sterile. The energy she was always talking about had been scrubbed clean. On the polished marble kitchen island, I left 2 documents placed side by side with mathematical precision. The first was a formal letter, drafted by Ryan, printed on his firm's letterhead. It was addressed to occupant and stated that the primary leaseholder, Ethan Davidson, had withdrawn his consent for her to reside at the property and that any attempt to enter would be considered trespassing. The second was a handwritten note from me on a simple white card. It said, "Chloe, you went to find your connection. I went to find mine too. I discovered my connection is with respect and loyalty. Good luck finding yourself. Don't look for me." Then I walked out, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. The operation was complete. I spent 10 days in a state of clean, data-driven silence. My new apartment was organized. My work was focused. My mind was clear. The storm I knew was gathering force somewhere over the Pacific, but in my world, the signal-to-noise ratio had never been better. Then on Friday afternoon, 4 days before Chloe was scheduled to return, I got the notification on my phone. "Ring alert person detected at your front door." I opened the app, and there she was, Sun-kissed from a vacation I'd paid for, wearing a new white linen dress, looking radiant and healed. She slid her key into the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again, jiggling it with a little laugh, as if the door was playing a silly game. The laugh faded. She pushed. She twisted the handle. Confusion flickered across her face. Then it curdled into annoyance, then panic, then pure unadulterated rage. She started banging on the door, her fists thudding against the solid wood. Ethan, what the hell is this? Open this door right now. I watched the silent movie on my phone, a small, grim smile on my face. Then I put my phone on silent and went back to work. An hour later, I checked again. 127 notifications. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, emails. It was a digital monsoon. I poured a glass of whiskey and began to triage the data. The texts from Chloe were a case study in psychological escalation. Phase 1, confusion. Ethan, where are you? The key isn't working. Is this a joke? Seriously, this isn't funny anymore. Call me. Phase 2, accusation and manipulation. I can't believe you would do this. You're trying to control me. This is what emotional abuse looks like. I come home from a healing journey and you lock me out. You're punishing me for trying to grow. Phase 3, threats. My mom is calling her lawyer. You can't just evict me. I have rights. I'm calling the police, Ethan. I'm going to tell them you've gone crazy. Then came the emails from her mother, Susan. The subject line of the first one was simply unacceptable. The body was a novel of entitlement. Ethan, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but you need to let my daughter back into her home immediately. She is in tears. You have caused her immense emotional distress. Whatever petty squabble you two are having, you do not abandon your fiancée like this. She deserves an apology, and you will be hearing from our family attorney. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Ryan with the note, add this to the file. But the most interesting piece of data came from an unexpected source. A text from my friend Luke, who still lived in the old building. The text read, dude, you are not going to believe this. The Bali trip didn't just end early. It blew up spectacularly. I called him immediately. What happened? Luke's voice was giddy with the thrill of high-quality gossip. So Caleb, the ex-boyfriend, isn't just an ex. He's a married ex. Has been for 2 years. His wife, Destiny, found the plane tickets on their credit card statement. She thought he was at a sales conference in Ohio. The beautiful, logical clarity of it all. It wasn't a spiritual journey. It was a failed attempt at poaching a married man. The retreat didn't end because Chloe missed me. It ended because Destiny threatened to fly to Bali herself and introduce Chloe's chakras to the concept of physical consequences. Chloe hadn't come home early. She'd been sent home in disgrace. That night, my phone buzzed with notifications of a different kind. Your password for Netflix has been reset. Your password for HBO Max has been reset. Your password for Hulu has been reset. From a hotel down the street, she was trying to reclaim the last vestiges of the life I had provided. It was the digital equivalent of rattling the doorknob. This was the most satisfying part of the entire operation. I logged into each account. I changed each password. Netflix became Find Your Own Netflix. HBO Max became Bali Didn't Pay the Bills. And my personal favorite Hulu became Namaste Away from my accounts. The final escalation of the week came on Saturday morning. I woke up to a text from my sister. Have you seen this? It was a link to a GoFundMe page. The title was A Masterpiece of Delusional Artistry, Help a Spiritual Entrepreneur Escape Financial Abuse. The photo was a selfie of Chloe, tears glistening in her eyes, taken in what looked like a Marriott hotel room. The description was a work of pure fiction. She wrote that for years she had been in a relationship with a man who controlled her finances, who isolated her from friends, and who punished her for her success. She claimed I had thrown her out onto the street with nothing but the clothes on her back because I was threatened by her spiritual growth. She'd set a goal of $25,000. She needed it. She wrote to secure a safe living space and rebuild her coaching business from the ashes of a toxic relationship. I checked the donation total, $50, 45 of which I noted with analytical satisfaction came from an anonymous donor named Susan. I took a screenshot. Then I sent the link to Ryan. His reply came a minute later. Oh, this is good. This isn't just slander. This is wire fraud. The data was all coming together. She wasn't just building a narrative. She was building my legal case for me. The GoFundMe campaign was a spectacular failure, but it achieved one thing. It gave Chloe and her mother just enough ammunition and just enough misguided validation to take the next inevitable step. They hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a man named Lawrence Croft, whose face was plastered on billboards across the city with the tagline, "Fighting for your fair share." It was the kind of advertising that appealed to people who believed fairness was something you could win rather than something you earned. The legal summons arrived a week later. It was like everything else Chloe did, a work of aspirational fiction. She was demanding compensation for unlawful eviction despite having left voluntarily. She wanted reimbursement for emotional labor and domestic contributions, a figure she'd apparently calculated at $50,000. And she was petitioning the court for the right to move back into the apartment, my apartment, pending a final settlement. Ryan read the document, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This isn't a lawsuit," he said. "This is a business plan. A very, very bad one." We met for a mandatory mediation session 2 weeks later. The room was a sterile beige box, designed to suck all the emotion out of a conflict. It failed. Chloe arrived dressed for the role of a lifetime the wronged woman. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfect, her makeup was subtle, and she had a single theatrical tear tracing a path down her cheek. Her mother, Susan, sat behind her, a bulldog in pearls, glaring at me as if I'd personally canceled Christmas. Lawrence, her lawyer, was all polished shoes and a $2,000 suit, oozing a confidence that his case simply didn't support. He began with a monologue that was part legal argument, part self-help seminar. He spoke of the unquantifiable value of a domestic partner's emotional investment. He talked about the invisible labor Chloe had performed, creating a home environment conducive to Mr. Davidson's professional success. He painted a picture of a partnership where one person handled the tangible, the money, and the other handled the ethereal, the vibrational wellness of the home. It was the most eloquent defense of being a freeloader I had ever heard. Chloe sobbed quietly on cue. Susan nodded grimly. I just sat there, my face a blank mask. Ryan didn't take a single note. He just listened patiently. When Lawrence finally wound down the mediator, a weary-looking woman named Judge Albright turned to us. "Mr. Ryan, your response." Ryan stood up slowly. He didn't address Lawrence's speech. He didn't argue about feelings or vibrations. He simply walked to the head of the table and plugged his laptop into the large monitor on the wall. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm and clear, "instead of discussing invisible things, my client and I would prefer to look at the visible data." The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't emotion. It was a single, beautiful, terrifyingly simple Excel spreadsheet. My spreadsheet. Final. Analysis. XLSX prime. The room went silent. The title on the screen was 18-month Financial Contribution Analysis, Davidson and Chloe. Ryan used a laser pointer, his hand steady. As you can see, Your Honor, we've broken down all shared household expenses over the course of the 18 months. Miss Chloe resided in my client's apartment. The laser dot moved across the screen. Column C represents all payments made by my client, Ethan. Rent, $36,000. Utilities, $7,200. Groceries, $9,450. Joint vacations, including the initial deposit for the Bali retreat, $6,800. He paused, letting the numbers hang in the air like an indictment. Total contribution from Mr. Davidson, $62,897.42. Then he moved the laser pointer to the next column. It was a stark, brutal column filled from top to bottom with a single repeating character. And this, Ryan said, his voice dropping slightly, is column D, total financial contribution from Miss Chloe. The laser pointer circled the grand total at the bottom, displayed in a bold, bright red font, $0 and 0 cents. A gasp escaped from Susan. Chloe's face had gone from sorrowful to sheet white. Her lawyer, Lawrence, was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly agape, his expensive confidence evaporating under the harsh glow of the projector. But Ryan wasn't finished. Now, I know Mr. Croft spoke eloquently about his client's invisible contributions, so we took the liberty of trying to visualize those as well. He clicked a button. The spreadsheet vanished, replaced by a slideshow. The first image was a screenshot from Chloe's Instagram feed taken 2 months prior. It was her posing in a bikini on the balcony of my penthouse, the city skyline behind her. The caption read, "Building my empire from the ground up." So grateful for this journey of self-made success. Boss babe, spiritual entrepreneur, independent woman. He clicked again. Another screenshot. Her at a restaurant I'd paid for with the caption, treating myself because I know my worth. He clicked again and again. A curated collection of her greatest lies, a digital portfolio of her parasitic existence, all set against the backdrop of a life I had single-handedly funded. Ryan turned off the monitor. The beige room was deathly quiet. He walked back to his seat. Your Honor, he said simply, the data speaks for itself. Judge Albright took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at Chloe, then at her lawyer, then back at Chloe. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was a profound, bottomless exhaustion. Mr. Croft, she said, her voice flat. Are you seriously asking this court to order a man to continue subsidizing your client's Instagram lifestyle after she decided to take a healing journey with her married ex-boyfriend? Lawrence, for the first time, was speechless. He just shook his head. The judge turned her gaze to Chloe. And you, young lady, you have a job, you have no children, and you lived rent-free for over a year in a luxury apartment. Your contribution was vibrational wellness. She didn't wait for an answer. She picked up her gavel, a small wooden tool of absolute finality. This is not a case of financial abuse. This is a case of spectacular entitlement. Petition dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp, clean crack. It was the sound of a closing parenthesis. It was the sound of a data set being finalized. It was the sound of a checkmate. The gavel fell, and the sound echoed in the sudden, heavy silence of the room. It was over. Chloe didn't move. She just stared at the empty screen, where the spreadsheet had been her face, a mask of disbelief. Her lawyer, Lawrence, a man who charged $1,000 an hour to be confident, was already packing his briefcase, avoiding her gaze like she was a contagious disease. Susan, her mother, was whispering frantically, "This can't be right. We'll appeal. We'll find another judge." But her voice lacked conviction. She'd seen the data too. Chloe finally broke. It wasn't a sob. It was a sharp, ugly shriek of pure, unfiltered rage. "This is a joke. He manipulated you. He manipulated all of you," she screamed at the judge, who was already gathering her papers, completely unmoved. 2 bailiffs took a step towards her. Lawrence put a hand on her arm, not to comfort her, but to silence her before she added contempt of court to her list of losses. She shook him off and stormed out of the room, her mother scurrying behind her. I watched them go. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt the quiet, clean satisfaction of a complex equation finally being solved. The fallout was immediate and digital. Someone in that mediation room had taken a picture of the spreadsheet on the monitor. By that evening, it was circulating in local social media groups with the caption, "Local life coach tries to sue ex-fiancé for rent, he brings the receipts." The post went viral in our city. The comments were a brutal public autopsy of Chloe's entire persona. Her influencer friends, the ones who filled her Instagram comments with fire emojis and "Yas Queen," went completely silent. Then one by one, they began to unfollow her. Her social circle was collapsing in real time. The GoFundMe page was hit with a tidal wave of fraud reports. Within 24 hours, the campaign was suspended, the $50 refunded, and the page was replaced with a cold corporate message about violating community standards. Caleb and his wife Destiny, seeing the public verdict, blocked her on every platform imaginable. The last escape route to her past was sealed. Looking at the wreckage of her life spread across my phone screen, I didn't just feel vindicated. As an analyst, I saw an inevitable, predictable outcome. Why did Chloe's world collapse so quickly, so completely, the moment my support was removed? The answer isn't about karma or luck. It's about a concept called social capital. Sociologists talk about 2 kinds. The first is bonding capital. This is the strong stuff built on real trust, shared history, and genuine affection. It's the kind of capital that means your best friend like Ryan will drop everything to draft a legal letter for you, no questions asked. It's the currency of loyalty. My social capital, while small, was solid gold. The second kind is bridging capital. This is the weaker, more transactional type. It's built on surface-level connections, shared interests, and most importantly, perceived value and status. Chloe's entire network was built on bridging capital. Her friends weren't friends, they were followers. They were people who came to the parties I paid for, who admired the apartment I rented, who double-tapped the photos of the lifestyle I funded. They weren't connected to her. They were connected to the image. She projected an image that was bankrolled by my income. So when the financial foundation of that image, stepped away, the entire structure came crashing down. Her social capital wasn't real currency. It was a speculative bubble, and the market had just corrected itself in the most brutal way possible. Those people didn't betray her. They simply acted according to the unwritten terms of their relationship. When the perceived benefits disappeared, the connection was terminated. It was a cold, logical, and utterly predictable system crash. She had spent years building a life on the fragile scaffolding of image and other people's money. Now she was left with nothing but the rubble. A harsh but valuable lesson in the difference between having followers and having friends. The months that followed were a study in divergent data streams. My life began trending upwards, a clean ascending line on a graph. Chloe's, from what I could gather, was a chaotic scatterplot full of errors and negative correlations. My new apartment wasn't a penthouse. It didn't have a view of the entire city. It was smaller, cleaner, more efficient. Every object in it had a purpose. There were no decorative crystals bleeding energy onto my bookshelves. There were no dream catchers collecting dust in the corners. There was just quiet, functional space. My work thrived in the silence. The models I built were more accurate. The insights I found were deeper. Without the constant low-level hum of her manufactured drama, my mind was free to find the real patterns. My boss noticed. A promotion I'd been told was 6 months away was suddenly on the table, effective immediately. Then there was Heather. We met through a joint project at work. She was an architect consulting on a new office build, and I was analyzing the space utilization data. She was brilliant. Sharp, logical, and funny. Our first date was a 3-hour argument over coffee about the inefficiency of open-plan offices, complete with sketches on napkins. Our conversations were about blueprints, not birth charts, about structural integrity, not spiritual blockages. She had her own career, her own apartment, her own life. When she came over, she brought a bottle of wine or a new idea, not a list of emotional demands. She saw my spreadsheet from the mediation. Ryan had saved a copy as a trophy, and she didn't just laugh. She said, "That's the most beautiful data visualization of a breakup I have ever seen. I was building something new, something real." Chloe, meanwhile, was deconstructing. Luke, my source from the old building, would send me periodic updates like a field reporter from a disaster zone. She had, as predicted, moved back in with her parents. Her grand spiritual coaching empire was now being broadcast from her childhood bedroom. Luke sent me a screenshot from one of her Instagram lives. She was sitting in front of a poster of some 90s boy band talking to an audience of 12 people about the importance of creating your own sovereign space. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. Her social media had become a sad, repetitive loop of vague quotes about overcoming betrayal and rising from the ashes, interspersed with desperate attempts to sell a $20 PDF on how to manifest abundance while healing from a toxic ex. She was trying to monetize her own failure, and the market wasn't buying. The two trend lines, mine and hers, were moving in opposite directions, destined never to cross again, or so I thought. Last Friday, I was at a downtown bar with some colleagues after a successful project launch. I was laughing, feeling lighter than I had in years, when a voice cut through the noise. Ethan, I turned. It was Garrett. He was alone, hunched over the bar, looking like a man who had lost a war. He was drunk. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. The confident hemp necklace wearing guru from the gym parking lot was gone, replaced by this deflated, pathetic figure. "Hey man," he slurred, stumbling towards me. I need to apologize." I held up a hand. "You don't. It's over. We're good." I had no interest in reliving it. "No, man, you don't get it," he insisted, grabbing my arm. His grip was surprisingly weak. "I gotta tell you, she played me too. She played us both." He leaned in his breath, a foul mix of cheap whiskey and regret. "That whole Bali trip, that wasn't my idea. That was her. She'd been texting me for months before that, telling me she was leaving you." I just stared at him, my face impassive. This wasn't new data, but it was a confirmation from a primary source. "She told me you two were just roommates," he continued, his voice cracking. "Said it was a relationship of convenience and that you were emotionally abusive. She made it sound like she was a prisoner man." And I fell for it. He took a long, shaky swig of his drink, but the whole Tantra thing, that was the craziest part. She had this whole fantasy planned out. She thought we were going to go to Bali, have this big spiritual awakening, and I was going to leave Destiny and we'd, I don't know, start a life together. He laughed a bitter, humorless sound. My wife found the tickets and that was it. Game over. But even then, Chloe didn't get it. She actually got mad at me for getting caught. He shook his head, looking down into his glass, as if the answers were at the bottom. Then he looked up at me and his eyes were suddenly clear, filled with a raw, ugly truth. This was the moment, the final satisfaction trigger. And you, man, the stuff she used to say about you, I'm sorry. What did she say, Garrett? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He winced. She said, she told me not to worry about you finding out because you were too passive to ever do anything about it. She said you were safe, predictable. He took another breath and delivered the final fatal line. She called you her walking ATM, said you were just a machine that paid for her life until she could find a proper upgrade. I swear, man, those were her exact words. A walking ATM. There it was. The final data point I didn't even know I needed. All the vague feelings of being used, all the suspicions, all the red flags distilled into 3 perfect, brutal words. A walking ATM. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel rage. I felt a profound, ice-cold clarity. The last lingering trace of sentiment I might have had for the woman I almost married evaporated in that instant. It wasn't a betrayal anymore. It was just a failed business transaction. I looked at Garrett, this broken, foolish man who had been both a pawn and a player in Chloe's little game. I clapped him on the shoulder. Thanks for the data, I said. Then I turned, walked away from him and back to my new life, leaving him alone with the bill. I'm sitting in my new apartment, the one Heather helped me pick out. It's quiet. On the triple monitor set up in front of me, a clean data visualization shows a steady upward trend, growth, profitability. But I'm not really seeing the chart. Instead, I'm thinking about that last piece of data Garrett gave me, a walking ATM. I expected to feel a final surge of anger, a satisfying spike of rage, but it never came. There's no emotion left. As an analyst, all I see now is the complete data set from the first red flag to the final system crash. Chloe wasn't a villain. She was just a flawed algorithm, a program written with the code of entitlement and insecurity designed to run on a platform of other people's resources. Her life was a bubble, and my spreadsheet was the pin that finally popped it. My actions, they weren't revenge. Not really. It was just a necessary data cleanse, a hard reboot of my own operating system before the corruption spread any further. When she first made her ridiculous demand, part of me wanted to fight to argue, to show her the mountain of evidence I already had. But I chose another path. We're often taught that strength is confrontation, that winning means shouting the loudest. But there is a greater power, a quieter one, the power of choosing not to participate. That quiet exit, that calm, sounds great, wasn't me surrendering the game. It was me recognizing the game wasn't worth my energy. It was me taking my king, my self-respect, and simply walking away from the board. By refusing to engage in her drama, I rendered her attacks meaningless. I left her alone on an empty chessboard of her own creation, checkmated by her own moves. My life now is simpler. It's built on verifiable facts, mutual respect, and a positive return on emotional investment. It's a system that works. Heather just sent me a text, a picture of a ridiculous-looking dog at the local shelter with the caption, "Data suggests our household happiness index would increase by 47% with this new addition." Thoughts I smile, a real smile. It's a different kind of data, a better kind. I look out the window at the city lights below, a million tiny data points forming a beautiful, complex, and logical network. Data never lies. And the truth is, removing the corrupt files is the only way to ensure the integrity of the entire system. In business and in life, it's all the same. Finished script.